Hello and welcome to Delta College Impact. I'm Roger Waller, your host for today's program. And today we've got a really tasty show for you. Okay, that's my little host humor, as we're going to talk about our culinary arts program here at Delta College. And joining me on today's program, we have John Britto of our culinary arts department. And to John's left is one of our culinary arts student, Tracy Ellison. Well, let's begin with Chef John. Chef John, we're back again to talk about the culinary arts program. And I think just to acquaint our audience again with the program, you might give the big picture of how culinary arts fits into Delta College and some of the courses that we offer.
Terrific. Delta College has about 70 vocational programs, and culinary arts is one of those 70. And like the other 69 classes or so that teach vocational ed, we try to make students work ready. So when they finish our program, they go into a variety of careers. We have people who go into dietetic service supervisors. We have people who own their own restaurant, cooks, bakers, and some folks even go into sales because they know if they're selling food to different restaurants, they have to have dialogue with people who are doing the cooking.
And I know not only vocational programs, but you have a lot of those fun classes for people who just want to dabble in the kitchen, I guess, and to take some of those classes as well. What would be some of those courses?
We have some community outreach programs. We call them short courses. We have ice carving, we have chocolate, we have desserts. We've offered sausage making and various courses like that, and they range anywhere from 3 weeks to 6 weeks in length, one night a week. And so if a person wants to look to the catalog and say, well, I've got 3 Tuesday nights available, why not come in? Because cooking is truly a life skill.
Oh, well, I'll say it really is a life skill. Eating, I guess that's my skill. But one of the things we want to point out is on the second half of the show, John and Tracy, and we're going to talk a little bit about what you do with a little piece of cake to make it look really appealing. But Tracy, let's talk with you a little bit about why you chose the culinary arts program.
Well, I chose culinary arts because it seems like I've been cooking since I could stand. And it was always a really good thing in my family. We have a lot of cooks in the family, so it was just kind of a family thing, and I felt very comfortable with it, and I decided to come here to finish my education.
Now, when you have cooks in the family, these are professional cooks? Or?
Oh, no, family-style cooks. My grandmother is my biggest inspiration. She was homegrown, home-taught cook, and she's fantastic.
Now, John, when you have students who come into the program, do they come in all shapes and sizes from the standpoint of coming right from high school and some returning students? And what is it that attracts them to the program?
Absolutely. I would think that if you look at the profile of a person who is entering into this industry, they are first they have a giving, serving heart. Hospitality, after all, is trying to make other people happy. It's just that in our particular discipline, we try to make them happy through food. And in the restaurant business, we create and sustain illusion, is what it amounts to, for the entire period of time that they finally make the decision to go eat. Once that occurs, they've triggered their physiological and psychological clock. And we have to serve that. And a lot of folks are not meant to do that. They'd much rather be some other kind of profession working quietly by themselves in an office or in a bank. And those, the world is made up of all kinds of wonderful people. But the people who want to come into this industry really care about other folks and trying to make them happy.
Now, Tracy, I know this is your second year in the program, and what are some of those tasty classes that you've had here and ones that you've really enjoyed?
My favorite has to be the 19 class of restaurant operations this semester. It's been the best so far. And restaurant desserts was another favorite. And the ice carving, of course.
Now, you mentioned restaurant desserts. What is it about that course that you said, hey, that's one of my favorites? What was involved in it?
Well, you're always told not to play with your food. He tells you to play with your food. You learn different ways of plating it, unusual different ways, just ways of making a simple, ordinary thing more appealing.
Now, John, I know one of your classic classes is the ice sculpture class that you teach. Now, ice sculpture, I see me playing with an ice cube, but you play with rather large ice cubes and you come up with some pretty unique sculptures. What's involved in that class, and what would a student expect?
Well, we start with a 300-pound block of ice, and then you whittle away whatever you don't want those pieces to be. So if you want to make an elephant, you cut away what is not an elephant. But a lot of folks lack conceptualization, three-dimensional conceptualization. So we start them with a potato, actually, so that they can actually cut part 1, part 2, part 3, and start to understand what it's like to cut away with ice. And there is some similarities, because if you make a mistake on the potato, it's gone, and it's the same thing with the ice. The difference being is that as you work with ice, it changes the whole time you're working with it, as opposed to wood or stone or some other medium. So you have to understand what's happening in the chemistry of what you're doing. And of course the wind and the rain and those kinds of things, you have to be factored into it.
Yeah, well, that's true. And plus you're creating art, I guess, that you know is not going to be there, after the temperature goes above a certain level. And
well, but we're talking about vocation education, so we want people to go out and become gainfully employed in the community and make a living. And so if it were not to melt, they would be out of a job. So it causes folks to come back and order another ice sculpture. But I would like to comment about Tracy's note a moment ago when she said, yes, I do want them to play with the food. However, in this particular case, it's the creative, playful kind of thing that I'm speaking of. And in the second half of this segment, we're going to talk about different shapes and designs and combinations of food. Not so much playing with fingers, because the other class that I teach is sanitation. So I just wanted to clarify that.
That's a good point. That's not me making my little dam with the potatoes on my plate or whatever. Well, we're going to show you a little bit of some of the visuals here at the program at Delta College. Give you a little bit of an idea of some of the behind the scenes. And here we see, John, what is going on back there?
Well, it appears that that's a fairly large dinner, and it seems to me we're going to have about 167 people at that dinner, and they all paid $45 a person. And
Sounds like our culinary arts dinner.
It is, and it's an annual event that really raises some scholarship money for well-deserving students. And very soon we're going to be up to the $5,000 mark that we give away every year to deserving students.
Now, as you start to see, Tracy, did you have an opportunity to work on this project?
Yes, I did.
And what's the biggest challenge when you're serving that many people?
Timing, getting it to the guest quickly without any deterioration of the food, or as little deterioration as possible, and making them happy.
Now, how do you decide what goes on the menu, John? Is it the same thing every year?
Oh, no. The menu changes every year because we have folks who look forward to this and mark their calendar, and so we always want to make sure that there's something different. Absolutely.
And we're going to, at the end of today's program, we'll have a phone number and an address that you can contact our Culinary Arts program and find out, hey, when this dinner is going to come up. Now, as far as how many courses do you serve?
We serve 4. There is what we call the shake and howdy session. People come in and they're signing up and they get their name tags and finding out where they're going to sit and so forth. Then we have appetizers that are passed with the live jazz, pianist, and wine. And then they sit down and they have a first course. Typically it's a salad or a hot appetizer.
And I know it's a little bit of an art to table setting as well, as we see that lovely table in front of us. Is that another one of the courses that you teach?
Of course. We talk about napkin folding, we talk about service, how to clear, beverage service, and so forth.
So you really do cover it all. And I think that, Tracy, now as you've seen your confidence build on your ability to not only cook for yourself, but to cook for 160 people,
Right.
What have you seen that transition in your knowledge being gained? Is it portion control, or is it, what's the big key as you've gained that confidence?
Lots and lots of research. That's the main thing. We have to know what we're going to do before we do it and have a plan. We have to know ahead of time, what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, because, you can't, lose time in the kitchen. It's just not possible.
Now, when you go into that restaurant and you're going to be that chef in a restaurant, what goes into menu development? Is it the type of thing that you say, well, Friday we have fish and Monday we're going to have this?
Oh, no.
What's the key to success in menu planning?
In menu planning, we learned to have a profile of your customer, know who your customer is so that you can provide the best, service. And you've got to know what you're going to do. If you're going to have a Chinese food restaurant, you're not going to serve hamburgers. I mean, it doesn't make, your menu has to make sense. It has to make sense price-wise, equipment-wise, personnel-wise, because if you're serving, something that your workers can't do, it's going to be a flop. So you've got to know who you're hiring, and that's all those little intricate details that figure in.
Hey, that sounds great. Now, John, I know that one of your keys is to give our students hands-on experience, and that doesn't just happen once a year at the Culinary Arts Dinner. It actually happens once or twice a week here on campus. What are some of the programs where students do get that opportunity to test their skills and have us eat their projects?
The classes operate the Student Chef Restaurant, which is open to the public 2 days a week, Wednesdays and Thursdays, 11:15 to 12:30. And the students rotate between service, production in the kitchen as well as pastry. And then the advanced students rotate between being the sous chef, or the person in charge of the hot kitchen, the pastry chef, or the restaurant manager. And as they progress through the entire year assigned to run that restaurant, I get further and further away. So I want them to walk to the cliff without actually falling over, so that they get a sense of what real pressure is. If they've never had that responsibility, then it's very difficult for them to ascertain, can I handle this pressure? So towards the end of each semester, I back off and let them make the menus, order the food, make the assignments, make the forecast, do the research for the type of food that they're going to serve based on their experiences, and essentially I'm unemployed for that month.
You know, I guess one of the things that I have to think about is when Tracy walks away from the program, does she walk away with the AA degree, or are there other sorts of certifications or recognitions that a student gets?
Good question. We have a multitude of things they can do. We have a basic certificate for a person that is trying to come from a position of underemployment or unemployment and enter into the labor force at a minimum job. And then we have an advanced certificate that takes quite a bit longer. We have a choice of an associate degree, AA or AS, if they want to merge in their general education requirements as well.
Now, is there a bachelor's program that a student could transfer to, or is this pretty much looked at the terminal degree?
There are about 33 community colleges in California that offer hospitality programs, culinary arts, restaurant management, and so forth, and all of them offer two-year degrees. There are obviously four-year schools that offer bachelor's degrees as well as master's degrees, and there's a few that offer PhDs in this discipline, but it's not culinary arts once you get to that point. Now we're talking more managerial responsibility and so forth, purchasing agent and so forth. However, having said that, there are a few proprietary schools that offer baccalaureate degrees that are called BOS, a Bachelor's in Occupational Studies.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, I'll tell you, we've learned a lot about our culinary arts program here, and now let's see some of the outputs. We're going to be back after brief public service messages, and let's take a look at what you can do with a little piece of cake. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to Delta College Impact. I'm Roger Waller, your host for today's show. And as you can see, we're mixing up a real special program for you today, and we're talking about the Delta College Culinary Arts Program. On the first half of the show, we talked with Tracy Ellison and John Britto, our instructor in the Culinary Arts Program, about the specifics of the program and some of the courses. And now, on the second half of the show, we start to talk about some of the outputs. And Chef John Britto is joined by soon-to-be Chef John Franco of our Culinary Arts Program. And John, we talked with Chef John before, but John, what got you into the Culinary Arts Program?
Ever since I was a little kid, I started messing around first with, of course, toast and jelly. And then one day, it turned out that I woke up with my brothers and convinced them all that we need to make breakfast for my mom and dad. So then we started doing it on weekends, every morning, getting up at 5 in the morning, get breakfast ready and served to them in bed. They'd wake up, of course, kind of yelling at, "Hey, what are you waking me up for? Time to sleep in." But they were really impressed with me. So ever since then, I found a love for it.
Now that is great. Now you went to St. Mary's High School here in Stockton, and did they have a culinary arts program that sort of enticed you to get into this?
They have somewhat of cooking classes there. They're fun, interesting to get you started, but they're nowhere compared nowhere near what we're doing here at the Delta College.
And now, after you complete the program here at Delta, you're also looking forward to continuing on at what school?
The California Culinary Arts Academy.
And that's the one in San Francisco. Yes. And I know, Chef John, that do we have a number of our students who progress on to like the culinary arts program?
We do. We have folks who go on to many of the proprietary schools throughout the United States, not just CCA in San Francisco. And we stay in touch with all of our graduates. And in fact, just last week I received a call from a former student from Brazil who is working down there now. So it's really exciting when you're in education to find out where your students end up and, you know, to keep their pulse. We have found the students who have left our program go on to exceed all expectations in their classes at these proprietary schools because they're building on a very solid foundation. Right. And they know what's coming down the pike. They speak the language. They already have great skills. And so they're usually tapped for some leadership positions when they go on. And when you're in a leadership position in a proprietary school, typically you get really good extern assignments. And typically, because of your advanced status, most of the chef instructors kind of keep an eye on you, so you get really good job recommendations when you leave. So we find that it's win-win.
Oh, it sounds like it's frosting on the cake, so to speak. Oh, all right. Well, that leads me into our little discussion on, speaking of cakes, as we are, one of the things I think you can see is that I tell you, this culinary arts program seems like a piece of cake. Now, you see this a lot in restaurants, John, and I guess my question is there anything else you can do with this lovely piece of cake?
In fact, there are a few things.
I knew you'd share with us a few.
What we wanted to do today for the audience out there is to show you other ways you could take that simple triangle, that little wedge, and put it on a plate and provide other dimensions, other flavors and so forth and colors to make it a tad more exciting. Typically, they used to serve it on this size plate. We no longer have that philosophy in our profession because when you reduce the size of the plate, you reduce the importance of that product in the mind's eye of the guest. So typically now we're having larger plates for appetizers and salads, larger plates for the entree, and larger plates for the desserts because that makes a very, very bold statement that we have equality and every course is important. And so that's kind of what we're talking about today. And so we have just a variety of shapes and ways to serve this simple piece of chocolate cake.
Well, let's see some of those ways.
John, you want to talk about one?
Well, this is an interesting one. What we did was we got the piece of cake, we sliced it lengthwise. Then
maybe you could show that a little bit better for our camera, John, just to give our viewers a little bit better perspective of the cake.
Right there. Okay, that's fine. And we just sliced it, and then we held them apart, and we put the whipped cream down first, and then we put the piece of cake against that, then piped another piece of whipped cream, put the cake layered against that, and then did it again right here. We have drips of strawberry sauce with a chocolate and sour cream sauce over here, and garnished with mint.
You know what's amazing, John, I guess we should point out again, is that cake is basically the same dimensions as this plain wedge, and you've now just transformed it into a much more visually appealing dessert.
Each one of these plates have the exact same wedge, if you will. It's just that we decided to slice them and/or in some cases dice them, or in some cases encase them in phyllo, just to make it different. And that's what we want to do in this business. People go back to restaurants because they get things at the restaurant that they can't make at home or they won't make at home. And of course, after they've gone to the restaurant 2 or 3 times, they want to be excited. They want to see something new and different. And so we're challenged as professional chefs to continue to try to amaze them or dazzle them so they can say, wow. Chefs live for wow. And that's, of course, in the profit, don't forget that as well. But we want to make the guests very, very happy, and wow is the beginning of that. So whether they say it out loud or to themselves, this is interesting. Wow, I never thought about that. That's what we're trying to do.
Now, John, where did you learn some of these skills? Which course are you taking to learn about
Well, you can take Culinary Arts 7, which is like a baking program, and they go over all different types of cakes, cookies, pies, phyllo, puff pastry, and some of the unique things that I've never even heard of in my life. And you just get introduced to this stuff, and next thing you know, you start working with it and playing with it, and then it comes out. It's really fun.
And now let's go to another plate and get an idea of what else we can do with that simple wedge of cake.
I'll take this one if you don't mind. This particular one I think is very, very fascinating because In this plate here, I don't know if you can get a close-up of that, that's, again, the same size of wedge, but in the middle of that plate, we typed a rosette of ganache, which is a chocolate and cream, like you would find the center of a truffle. And over that, we piped the whipped cream. And into that whipped cream, we put the cake that we diced, and we pressed it into it ever so gently, and then we dusted it with powdered sugar, and then put the sauce around it. So we have multiple flavors and textures inside that particular dessert, even though it's the same wedge as this one.
Now, we talked a little bit earlier on the first half of the show about that creativity that goes into cooking. Now, does it take a lot of experimenting of trying to get what foods and flavors fit together?
Interestingly, it takes a lot of research because most of what America is founded upon is what we call the Eurocentric cuisines. However, once that Eurocentric cuisine was brought over here, it merged with the Asian cuisine that came over, as well as the Spanish and the Mexican cuisine that all came to make America American food. Now, France and China, of course, who've had thousands of years of working on their particular cuisines, have them codified. Well, the United States is not quite like that, although we're very, very rich in regional cuisines and micro-regional cuisines, such as the wine country or New Orleans or something of that sort.
Mm-hmm. And so as we start to blend these together, we can start to see where you come up with some other ideas as far as, gee whiz, how things can go together. And I notice one of these things is putting flowers on plates. I mean, I know a lot of times this is used strictly decorative.
They are edible. However, you want to make sure that you get them from a reputable source that are grown and organically. So you don't want pesticides and those kinds of things on your plate. But there are all edible flowers that are out there. And in fact, sometimes we chop them, we mix them with butter. Sometimes we chop them, we mix them and mold them in ice cream. We make sauces out of them and so forth. So there's a lot of things that are being done. If I could just go back about that melding of cuisines. For instance, this is a phyllo, and inside this again, another wedge of cake. But the phyllo is from the Greek origins, and then inside there we have a layer of ganache, again, which is primarily the French origins, with the merging of the chocolate and the cream. And then we have good old American chocolate cake, and the chocolate, of course, comes from Mexico. So inside here, this is an example of what we call fusion cuisine.
And that's a great term, I think, is fusion, as you bring together different parts. Now, John, as you started to get into this class, and did you find that you enjoyed certain flavors, or do you gain a specialty or sort of a better appreciation of some of these tastes?
Yeah, I think I've become more appreciative of the flavors and textures that go together, because, I mean, something that I've learned and I'll take with me the rest of my life is that whenever you're eating desserts, you should always have something of a crunch factor. So it's soft and textury and maybe chewy, but then you always want that extra little crispness when you take a bite. It just tastes that much better.
Huh. That's a great point, and I guess one of those things that you can start to gain that sensitivity as you start to become your specialist in those things that you enjoy. Now, John, do you see different students and different tastes? I would imagine would be one of the big challenges as you go through a class is that John may like this and I may like something else.
It's an enormous challenge because we have folks who come from all different types of backgrounds, from different heritages and so forth. And when they arrive, we try to expose them to lots of different types of food from India and from Mexico and from China and so forth. And a lot of folks have allergies, and some of them have religious prohibitions, and we have to respect those. But somewhere along the way, I work with them, and they have to maintain a journal, by the way, for the year that they're in the restaurant. And they analyze the food, every single thing. They have to taste it, and they have to analyze, and they have to make recommendations. What would they do differently? What would they add? What would they subtract? Because I definitely want people to develop critical analysis when they start talking about food, textures and flavors and so on.
And that's like the crunch factor and some of these other things that sort of enter into it. Well, let's take a look at another selection of desserts that you have here.
Okay, I like this one right here. What we did was we cut it, again, somewhat of an angle on the bias of the cake, and we fanned it out, and we piped the whipped cream, and then we have a sour cream and strawberry sauce painting on the side with the garnish of the flour.
I can show you the on the back side here. Yeah, you can see now. Does it take you a long time? Is this like an art form that you say on the adding the little shaping and sizing and the whipped cream there?
It's not really a long process. It's just being creative and kind of let your mind wander as you do these kind of things. So it's really simple.
So you're not spelling anything out in here? Just making a pretty design at this point.
We send no subliminal messages. We don't do that.
Like Big Tip is not printed in
No,
there?
yeah, please come again. We don't, no subliminal messages there. What we try to do is give them as many different looks as possible. And primarily so that the students can see the depth and the scope of the creativity that one has to bring to the culinary art field, because that's half of our name, culinary arts. And so those folks that have a pretty good disposition towards artistic endeavors tend to proceed and advance a little more rapidly than some others. But everybody can do this. Once you see it, they can do this.
And I think one of the amazing things, again, is as we look at this, is that this is all taken from that one fundamental
Correct.
piece of cake
They're
and
all the
all that you can do with that. And I think it's just been fantastic for me. And I should point out one thing. That John did not bring a fork, so he made sure that I could not dive into these desserts before the end of the show. But I did want to remind you about our culinary arts program and give you the idea of how you can get in touch with this program. And just like John Franco mentioned, you start with an idea and you can build on it here at Delta College. And John is part of our culinary arts faculty along with his wife, Britto. And you can contact them here at Delta College or give them a phone call at area code 209-954-5582. And I think they have a lot of exciting programs, not only the culinary arts dinner, our courses, student chef, and a lot of these programs that will just get you excited about our program. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me, and we encourage you to watch future Delta College Impact programs. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, Roger.